right, good morning. Welcome to our daily study. We've been studying in this book, Your Invisible Power by Genevieve Behrend. We've been going over her story of how she became a personal pupil of Thomas Troward, that she had gone to the um, the bookstore, and then that led her to go to this astrologer, and then that astrologer gave her the answer that she was looking for. And so we're going to pick up the story there and continue on with this study. So we're in chapter, let's see, chapter 10, I believe. All right. So on Sunday afternoon, at the appointed time, the professor arrived, and I was handing him the slip of paper with all the data of my birth, etc., when the idea came to me to ask the professor for the answer to the question about the 16th verse of the 21st chapter of Revelation. The thought was instantly carried into effect, and I found myself asking this man what he thought this verse meant. Without pausing to think it over, he immediately replied, "It means the city signifies the truth, and the truth is non-invertible. Every side from which you approach it, it is exactly the same." Intuitively and undoubtingly, I recognized this answer as the true one, and my joy knew no bounds, because I felt sure that with this correct answer in my possession, Troward would accept me as his pupil in the fall. Again, I went back just a little bit to help us to pick up this story again. Again, she went through just kind of this serendipitous event to go on and meet with this professor, and he gave her the exact answer that she was looking for. As the great astrologer was leaving, I explained to him all about my desire to study with Troward, how I had come from New York City for that express purpose, seemingly to no avail, until the answer to this question had been given to me by him. He was greatly interested and asked many questions about Troward, and when asked if he would please send me his bill, he smilingly replied, "Let me know if the great Troward accepts you as his pupil," and bade me good afternoon. I hastened to my room to send a telegram to Troward, giving my answer to the question about the 16th verse of the 21st chapter of Revelation. There was an immediate response from Troward that said, "Your answer is correct," and beginning a course of lectures on the Great Pyramid in London. If you wish to attend them, we'll be pleased to have you, and afterward, if you still wish to study with me, I think it can be arranged. On receipt of this reply, preparations were at once made to leave Paris for London. So I just find this story very fascinating, and this has been my own personal experience, is when we enter into this creative process, when we turn things over to this spiritual substance that penetrates and permeates the entire universe, and we take action upon what's right in front of us, that the next step appears, and the next step appears. And oftentimes we get these bursts of inspiration. We get these thoughts of where to go next, what to do. And sometimes these things can be a little weird sometimes, or think, how is me going to that? How is me going and doing that going to lead me towards what I want? And Genevieve Behrend was thinking that same thing. How is going to this astrologer going to help me out in any way? But again, as we talked about last time, that going over those or going over that question, her asking all of her relatives, family members, clergymen, people that she knew, acquaintances, no one had given her the response that she needed to give Troward so that he would accept her as his student. But as she followed this inspiration that told her to, go talk to this astrologer, the answer came. I attended all the lectures, receiving much instruction from them, after which arrangements were made for my studying with Troward. 2 days before leaving for Cornwall, I received the following letter from Troward, clearly indicating the line of study he gave me. So I also find it fascinating in this that Troward never took any students, except for Genevieve Behrend. So before her, he never accepted students. He felt he didn't have the time to devote to a pupil. And after Genevieve Behrend, he never did take another pupil or another student that he taught personally one-on-one. All of his lectures and everything that he taught on the mental sciences were always one-on-one, or in a group lecture type setting. They weren't one-on-one. And so sometimes when we're going after, there's this desire in our heart, or we feel this desire is from God for us to become more, to do more, to have more, and we go after that thing, there may be obstacles in our way that say this can't be done, or this has never been done. And we live in such a day that we shouldn't find it surprising that these kinds of things happen, because with all the new technology that we have, with all the just numerous examples of people doing things that have never been done before, that it shouldn't come to a surprise that if we feel a desire in our heart to go and do something, that, it can be done. There's the idea that's put out by quantum physicists and people that understand our brain and the way that it works really well, is that it is actually impossible for you to think a thought that you've never thought before. Because the idea is that you have these neurons in your brain, and as they fire, they give you the thoughts that you think. And so if you've never thought a thought before, meaning that you don't have the circuitry in your brain so that then these things can come out, it's impossible for you to think that thought. Now you may be thinking, but I have thoughts all the time that I've never thought before. Well, those thoughts had to come from somewhere. And this is a clear indication that there is something greater than us. There is some power, whether you call it the universe, God, or whatever, that there is something bigger than us that is inspiring us to think these thoughts that we've never thought before. So if you're getting an inspiration to do something that has never been done before, that's an indication that it actually can be done. Because if it was impossible to do it, there would be no thought that anybody had done it before. God wouldn't be able to inspire you with that if it was impossible. So the very fact that you have an idea to go and do something is an indication that it is possible to accomplish. So that could be your first indication that, is something for you to go after. And I've talked about this idea on other study calls that we've done. The difference between the desires of our heart and the desires of our fleshly body to kind of meet its appetites. There are differences between these desires that are coming from God and just the natural desires of our flesh to fulfill its bodily functions. Now, if you take a look at the word desire and you go to its Latin root, de means of, and sire means father. And so this word desire means actually of the Father, or it's coming from God. So these things are things that God has planted within us, desires that we want to have more, to be more, to do more, so that we can become more. Because as we become more, then we have a greater capacity to serve those around us. Because remember, we've talked on this call before about this idea of how that everything, all of creation, is going for advancement. And so if you can enter into that spirit of advancement, the resources will come to you to help you in your cause. But if you're going towards the dissolution or the retrograde of anything in your life, the resources and the abilities aren't going to come your way from this creative power, this creative source, because it wants more. And if you're going for less, it's not going to help you in your cause. So if you're going along in your process, you're going after this desire of your heart, and you're having these serendipitous moments, you're having these things that come out of nowhere to help you along the way, that is another indication that you are going along the right path, that you're going after the desire and that God is helping you along in your way. All right, let's go on with the letter that Troward wrote to her. Dear Mrs. Behrend, I think I had better write you a few lines with regard to your proposed studies with me, as I should be sorry for you to be under any misapprehension and so to suffer any disappointment. I have studied this subject now for several years and have a general acquaintance with the leading features of most of the systems which unfortunately occupy attention in many circles at the present time, such as Theosophy, the Tarot, the Kabbalah, and the like. And I have no hesitation in saying that, to the best of my judgment, All sorts and description of so-called occult study are in direct opposition to the real life-giving truth, and therefore you must not expect any teaching on such lines as these. Now, if you are aware of any of these kinds of things, Theosophy, the Tarot, the Kabbalah, and the like, there are things in them, there are truths within those things that are good, which are efficacious, but there are also things in those modes of teaching, those ways of philosophy, so to speak, that also lead away from life. And that's what Troward is talking about here. So I don't think that they're completely devoid of value. It's if you're going into those things to study them, to just learn about them, if it's something you're curious about, go into it with an eye of trying those things, with an eye of seeing where the good is and where the things that are going to lead you into failure. And so just be aware of those things. But he's saying here that if Genevieve Behrend is interested in those things, he's not going to teach about them. We hear a great deal these days about initiation, but believe me, the more you try to become a so-called initiate, the further you will put yourself from living life. I speak after many years of careful study and consideration when I say that the Bible and its revelation of Christ is the one thing really worth studying, and that is a subject large enough in all conscience, embracing as it does our outward life and of everyday concerns, and also the inner springs of our life, and all that we can in general terms conceive of the life in the unseen after putting off the body at death. Now, I've talked about this idea that many of the religious writings that exist out there in the world, I'm most familiar with the Bible myself. I'm not as familiar with some of the other religious writings, but they teach a lot of important truths. And oftentimes, if people aren't feeling the power that exists in those holy words, it's that they're not actually taking those words and applying the principles as they're written. A lot of times we approach these holy writings and these different kinds of things through our own perceptions, and we're trying to tell them what they are saying instead of letting those holy scriptures, those written words, tell us their meaning. So we should go into them with an idea of what is this writer? What is God? What is these holy scriptures trying to tell me? And going from there, instead of trying to put our own interpretation on them, trying to say, oh, this is what that means. And you'll find if you approach a study of any of these holy writings that way, or even just like the book that we're studying, if you approach them in that way and try to understand what is the author telling me, you're going to get so much more out of it. And you're going to be less likely to fall into error. A lot of times when we fall into errors, we go into these studies, we go into these things, and we try to tell them, this is what you're trying to tell me. And a lot of that is coming out of our own understanding. And sometimes our own understanding can have faults and weaknesses in it. And so, again, if you feel like that these holy words, these scriptures and stuff hold no meaning, they have no power, it's because you haven't studied them, you haven't brought out the actual principles, and you haven't applied the principles in your life. Because I can tell you from my own personal experiences, I have applied the principles of truth that are in those books, that it has transformed my life. And it has transformed the lives of my family as I've taught them these things, and as I lead them in learning these kinds of things. And as I use them to raise my children, I find that my children are very well behaved and happy children. All right, let's continue on with the letter. You have expressed a very great degree of confidence in my teaching. And if your confidence is such that you wish, as you say, to put yourself entirely under my guidance, I can only accept it as a very serious responsibility, and should have to ask you to exhibit that confidence by refusing to look into such so-called mysteries as I would forbid you to look into. I'm speaking from experience, but the result will be that much of my teaching will appear to be very simple, perhaps to some extent dogmatic, and you will say you have heard much of it before. Again, this is kind of going back to this idea that a lot of people read these holy words, they think that they know what they say, they don't feel the power. And what he's saying is that oftentimes when he's going to be teaching these things to her as a student, she's going to be like, yeah, I heard that before. But oftentimes it has no meaning to us because we haven't actually applied what those things are trying to teach us. But if we actually applied what those things were teaching us, it wouldn't matter how many times we heard those things, because we would find the truth of it coming out, and it would inspire and embolden us to continue on with those principles, instead of be like, yeah, I've heard this before. Why are we, going on with this? There's a difference that happens to those words when they take on the power of the principle. They fill us with life. And so it's not a burden to study those things. These kinds of things that I'm sharing with you on these calls, I don't find them a burden to go over and study them over and over again and to share them with you. It fills me with life. It fills me with understanding, because I've incorporated these principles into my life, and I continue to seek to incorporate more principles and to incorporate these principles further. They fill you with life. Faith in God, prayer and worship, approach to the Father through Christ. All this is in a certain sense familiar to you, and all I can hope to do is perhaps to throw a little more light on these subjects, that you may become to you not merely traditional words, but present living facts. So he's talking about these principles taking on an aliveness. And if you live these principles truly the way that they are meant to be lived, they do take on a life, and they give you more life. I have been thus explicit as I do not want you to have any disappointment. And also I should say, to our so-called course of study will be only friendly conversations at such times as we can fit them in, either you coming to our house or I to yours, as may be most convenient at the time. Also, I will lend you some books that will be helpful, but they are very few and in no sense occult. Now, if all this falls in with your ideas, we shall, I am sure, be very glad to see you at Rouen Manor, and you will find that the residents there, though few, are very friendly, and the neighborhood very pretty. But on the other hand, if you feel that you want some other source of learning, do not mind saying so, only you will never find any substitute for Christ. I trust you will not mind my writing you like this, but I do not want you to come all the way down to Cornwall and then be disappointed. With kindest regards, yours sincerely, Thomas Troward. This copy of Troward's letter, to my mind, is the greatest thing I can give you. So that ends off kind of her story of becoming Thomas Troward's student. I think that it's a very powerful example of what these principles can do in our life if we apply them. And just we got a few minutes here. I don't want to go into the next chapter. So I just wanted to go over a few things as review here, and then we'll end off our study call for today. So remember, as we've been learning in this, that for you to manifest something in your life, for you to create something in your life, to enter in as a co-creator with God, with this substance that permeates and penetrates the entire universe, and that is a creative substance, the first thing that we have to do is we have to have that clear vision in our mind. We have to know what it is that we're going after. And then we add to that the faith of that uplifted emotion that thing can be and is already ours. And if you want to think of it, I was reading through some of Troward's stuff in the last couple of days, and Troward talks about this idea that when you create with those mental faculties, that vision in your mind with that uplifted emotion, that you actually do create something. It's a spiritual creation at that point. And then at that point, this spiritual creation, if we continue to hold it and nurture it like a seed, we put it into fertile soil, then the opportunities are going to come to us on the physical plane for us to make that spiritual creation a physical reality. And so once you create that spiritual creation, you need to pay very close attention to the environment that you're in and what starts showing up in your life. Because the way for you to take that from a spiritual creation of created in your mind with your imagination and that uplifted emotion to the physical world is going to need you to take action upon those opportunities that show up in your life. And so with that idea, we'll end off this study call. Pay attention to what's in your environment right now. The Lord, God, the spiritual substance, universe, whatever you want to call it, is trying to answer your prayers already. And if you go into the Bible and you read and understand some of the things that are said there, the idea is that before you've even said your prayer, this spiritual substance that is aware and is an intelligent substance, and God that is behind all of it already knows the things that you need. He already knows the things that you're going to be asking for, and has already set in place and in store the way for you to be able to accomplish it, the way for you to be able to get it. And we've talked about this idea before, that having these things and, doing certain kinds of things, that it's not about the things in this life. If it was about the things, then the process would be you have the clear vision, the uplifted emotion, then the thing would just come to you. But the process is such that you have the thought, you have the emotion, the opportunities come, and those opportunities are opportunities to make you into a better person, to make you more than what you are. Because I can tell you from my own personal experience, God or the universe or whatever, this higher power doesn't really care about the things. What it does care about is you becoming more than what you are, because as you become more than what you are, you're more enabled to give service to those around you. And that, in that sense, creates that more that I was talking about earlier on this call. And as we create that more, we are in advancement of everything around it. And that is what God, what the universe, this higher power, the spirit, that's what they're all for, is creating more and creating advancement. They're not for the retrograde. And so just keep that in mind as you're going throughout this day. Again, pay attention to what's in your life and take advantage of the opportunities that God has already placed in front of you to give service to others, to take advantage of the opportunities that are presenting yourself for your further advancement. And that's will lead you on from where you're at to many wonderful things in your life. And so with that, we will end the call, and I will see you all tomorrow for more study of your invisible power. We'll go into chapter 11. So bye for now.